Frisco, The Secret History, a podcast. Welcome to the Secret History of Frisco podcast. I'm your host, Knox Bronson. We are going to revisit the question of Frisco today. Some people are quite passionate about it. This is the Call It Frisco Part 2 episode. Ever since I got sober many years ago, I have liked to joke that I spent much of my life shooting the dart into the beehive just to see what would happen. And that since getting sober, I've gotten a lot further away from the beehive. But because I am sober, my aim is so much better now. I knew that naming the podcast The Secret History of Frisco would ruffle some feathers, but I was unprepared for the vehemence of the anti-Frisco brigade. I posted a link to our first episode. Vice and crime were in San Francisco's DNA at its inception on the San Francisco Reddit group, which has 585,000 members. I felt I had enough episodes to finally announce our existence. The very first comment was from a guy named Voltaire, who posted, "OMG, change the name." Now, one would think that someone who chose Voltaire for a screen name would be a little more open-minded, since Voltaire was one of the 18th century architects of the Enlightenment. Alas, this was not the case. I replied, "You're funny. I want to bring Frisco back." I did an episode, Call It Frisco, about the origins and history of the term. I know lots of people hate it, but the people I want to focus on called it Frisco. I'm about to do Call It Frisco Part 2, and here we are. Even Herb Caen softened his stance on Frisco later in life. Voltaire replied, "The terms San Fran and Frisco are hated in SF. Do a Reddit search to see the strong reaction. Although your podcast might be interesting, I will pass because of the name." Another member, Dollarist, chimed in and said, "Dude, read the room." I replied that I had read the room, and something to the effect that the people I was writing about in the podcast called San Francisco Frisco. Another user, Sugarwax, responded, "I think you're mistaking others using it with permission for you to use it, but do you? I want to bring snobbery over Frisco back." I think Sugarwax meant "you do you," as the youngsters say now. In the hippie days, we said, "do your own thing." But I'm very happy Sugarwax was forthright about bringing snobbery over Frisco back. All this to say, I'm appreciating the engagement and all the people chiming in on the topic. I have suggested that they listen to the Call It Frisco episode, Part 1, but it seems like they won't. A friend of mine posted a very positive comment on the Reddit thread. This is what we do for our friends, correct? I'm grateful. He told me the next day that some guy who downvoted his comment on my post took the trouble to go to the archive of all of his comments on Reddit and downvoted every single one of them. That, my friends, is passion. Now, this is where things get a little weird, as they often do in Frisco. I waited a week and decided I would post on Reddit the most recent episode, a wonderful discussion of the two Maltese Falcon movies, and Dark Passage from 1947, all set in San Francisco, with local noir film historian and author Rachel Walther. I posted the link with a short description and immediately got this notice. This item was automatically removed because it contained demeaning language. Please read the rules for more information. I am a bot and this action was performed automatically. Please contact the moderators of this subreddit if you have any questions or concerns. I wrote to the moderators explaining the episode with a link to it. Today, I tried to post the Call It Frisco Part 1 episode, hoping the ban had been lifted. No such luck. I have a feeling that whoever downvoted all my friends' history of Reddit comments rounded up some of his friends to report the episode. It only takes 4 or 5 to trigger the algorithm. I wrote them again, and I expect that the ban will be lifted before too long. I'm going to say something that's not very nice, but of it, I am certain. Dan White, murderer of Harvey Milk and George Moscone, our mayor, never, ever called the city Frisco. And now I'm watching that dart sail across our beautiful blue California sky to that distant beehive. As Elvis Costello sang, "My aim is true." In my very first episode of The Secret History of Frisco, I touched on the Frisco question and included a snippet of a song from Dick Holdstock's wonderful album, San Francisco Shanties of the Gold Rush. I did this because all of the songs referred to the city as Frisco. I included another excerpt from a different song in the Call It Frisco episode, the first one. I want to share my favorite song from the album here. Well, at least a little bit of it. I'll have a link to it on YouTube in the show notes. It's called Whiskey Johnny, and it tells the same story about the dangers of drinking rum and whiskey in Frisco and how you better watch out for Shanghai Brown.
Now, if ever you go to Frisco town,
Whiskey Johnny,
mind you steer clear of Shanghai Brown.
whiskey for me Johnny-O.
He'll dope your whiskey night and morn,
Whiskey Johnny,
and then Shanghai you round Cape Horn.
whiskey for me Johnny-O.
2 months' wages they are dead,
Whiskey Johnny,
and the donkey's breakfast for your bed.
whiskey for me Johnny-O.
Oh, Shanghai Brown and Larry Ma,
Whiskey Johnny,
their names are known both near and far.
whiskey for me Johnny.
If you haven't listened to that first Call It Frisco episode, I strongly recommend it. Emperor Norton is featured in it. In 1872, the good Emperor Norton issued a proclamation about the use of the term Frisco, which was duly reported in all the local newspapers. It read, "Whoever, after due and proper warning, shall be heard to utter the abominable word Frisco, which has no linguistic or other warrant, shall be deemed guilty of a high misdemeanor, and shall pay into the imperial treasury, as penalty, the sum of $25. That would be about $650 today. I can find no record that he managed to collect any fines. I thought I would go back to that great San Franciscan Madam Sally Stanford and her thoughts on the term Frisco. If you haven't listened to the Sally Stanford Humphrey Bogart episode, I also recommend it. It covers a lot of Sally's early life. I want to read the first few pages of Chapter 3 from Sally's autobiography, The Lady of the House, ghostwritten by Bob Patterson, a.k.a. Freddie Francisco. Sally had very strong convictions about calling the city Frisco, and I'm sure you can guess that she was on the other side of the fence from Emperor Norton. Before we read Sally's dictum, I want to introduce a couple other legendary San Franciscans to whom Sally refers in Chapter 3. Foghorn Murphy was an Irishman well known in both Los Angeles and his hometown of San Francisco. At different times, he was a wholesale liquor dealer, a politician, and a radio announcer. He was also a ballyhoo specialist, which is where he became known as Foghorn Murphy. What is a ballyhoo specialist, you ask? In baseball regalia, equipped with a megaphone and astride a horse, he would ride up and down Market Street anytime there was a ball game scheduled, yelling about that day's game. He was at times involved in questionable business dealings. On more than one occasion, he fled with his wife Jean to Idaho to lay low while people tied to organized crime searched for him. Foghorn was mentioned in the book TNT, The Power Within You by Claude Bristol and Harold Sherman, published in 1957, where they told this story. Foghorn Murphy, the famous umpire baiter, said over the radio on Groucho Marx's You Bet Your Life show that the cheapest thing a person could do was to be nice to other people, greet them with a smile, and trust them, that this paid the biggest dividends. Pure Frisco, that Foghorn. The other character Sally mentioned was Charles Cora. San Francisco gambler Charles Cora had taken a lady of the night, Arabella Ryan, as his mistress and later his wife. On November 15, 1855, while the couple was at a theater on Market Street, United States Marshal William Richardson drunkenly and publicly insulted Arabella in the lobby. Charles was furious. A few days later, he shot and killed Marshal Richardson to defend his Arabella's honor. I am certain this is why Sally Stanford respected the man. Charles was arrested and quickly became a propaganda target of local newspaper man and self-proclaimed reformer James King of William. Yes, that was his name, James King of William, although newspaper reports referred to him mostly as James King. King of William called for the hanging of Charles Cora, writing that if Charles Cora were set free, it would prove that the vice lords had thoroughly corrupted San Francisco, or that the jury had been bribed, or that gamblers or other people of vice had gotten to the sheriff, or Bill Mulligan, the keeper of the county prison. As a result, Charles was brought to trial quickly and found guilty. At the time, King of William was also feuding publicly with another newspaper man, James P. Casey, the editor of the Sunday Times. They hated each other. Casey was also on the San Francisco County Board of Supervisors and, more importantly, was a good friend of Charles Cora's. On May 4th, 1856, King of William's Bulletin newspaper revealed that Casey had served a term in New York State's Sing Sing prison for grand larceny, embarrassing and infuriating Casey. On May 14, 1856, at 5 p.m., Casey accosted King of William at Montgomery and Washington streets and said, "Are you armed?" Without waiting for an answer, he aimed a large Navy revolver at King of William and demanded that King draw and defend himself. Then he fired one shot into King of William's chest. Surgeons worked in vain to save King of William, to no avail. He died a few days later. Casey was arrested. A few days after that, on May 22nd, authorities allowed Charles and Arabella to marry in a jailhouse ceremony. I like to think they were allowed to consummate the marriage. 2 hours later, Charles was taken from his cell by the San Francisco Vigilance Committee and lynched along with his friend, Supervisor James Casey. The widow Arabella Ryan Cora passed away at the age of 35, 6 years later. So remember these names, Foghorn Murphy and Charles Cora. While we're at it, let's remember Arabella and the valor Charles demonstrated in defending her honor. And here at long last we arrive at Sally Stanford's denouement with the opening pages of Chapter 3 in her autobiography. They were a wonderful set of burglars, the people who were running San Francisco when I first came to town in 1923. Wonderful because if they were stealing, they were doing it with class and style. When they turned City Hall and the Hall of Justice into a pair of stores with bargains for all, they did it with charm, finesse, and what the French call savoir-faire. They were the municipal swashbucklers and the civic high-binders. And compared with today's local statesmen, they didn't really try very hard to be much else, except just before election. This is understandable. The politics of the town were dominated by Mayor Jimmy Rolfe, Sunny Jim, or Dirty Jim, depending on where you sat politically. But believe me, he was a doll, a political dreamboat. Say what you will for New York's Jimmy Walker or Boston's Jim Curley. Jimmy Rolfe wore San Francisco like a tailor-made plaid suit, and on him it looked wonderful. Not only did Jimmy do okay, but the rest of us did pretty well too. For if there ever was a live and let live type, it was Mayor Rolfe of San Francisco. At one time in his colorful career, when asked to make a statement about prostitution, he said, "Leave it alone, just regulate it." That was his motto. Although the old Barbary Coast was gone, the town was spinning just as lustily as it always had, ever since the first pirate stepped down the gangplank from his ship, looked around, and ordered a passing Indian to bring on the women. The Tenderloin was teeming with prosperity, French restaurants with private rooms, and acquiescent ladies upstairs abounded. The North Beach or Italian district for years had been given over to the sober intercourses of industrious Neapolitan fishermen, hard-working broken English purveyors of salami and gorgonzola, and respectable mafia types who spent their time playing bocce ball and beating their wives. Now it bubbled with alcoholic activity. Speakeasies, wine flats, and nightclubs were plentiful. Even in the conservative financial district and practically every premise in town, where more than 3 men might congregate simultaneously, a Klondike game awaited, a game of chance where you throw a dozen dice out of a box to a layout, hoping that the proprietor will pay you a certain amount of money in the event that you shoot an unlikely total. Men loved it. No fortunes were lost, and some were made by the proprietors, that is. All this was done pretty much out in the open, with God and Jimmy Rolfe looking on. The love business flourished too. It should be stated that at this point it was easier to come by professional female company in San Francisco than it was to catch a rash in a leper colony. Not during services and not on Election Day in St. Mary's Cathedral Day, when every right-minded hustling gal was out voting for Jimmy Rolfe, but there was plenty of stuff around. A curious coincidence about it is that the statistics on rape were the lowest then than they ever have been since. Molestation and attacks by reason of perversion were 11% per capita of what they were 25 years later, at the time when Police Chief Charles Dullia announced the end of prostitution in San Francisco. But one thing was certain in those days. San Francisco was an open town and the people were happy about it. Like Rolfe said, pleasure wasn't prevented. It was regulated. Such regulation had to be organized and paid for. It was. There were price tags on most things, and usually the tab was fair. Now and then, unfortunately, some hungry cop or city hall hog would declare his own little personal markup, and then there would be a hassle. But mostly things jogged along on a cash and carry basis. There were few complaints. It's all very well in righteous retrospect to give the rap to corrupt officials, but this is a lot of borscht. This particular period of permissiveness lasted more than 30 years. Nothing lasts that long unless the people are willing that it should. The people of San Francisco liked a free and easy town. They were not shocked by the facts of life. They were apparently disinterested in a blue law town. They turned down year after year at the polls every clown who sought office on a cleanup ticket. World War II brought an entirely new species of San Franciscan to town. Fascinated by what they saw in our town on their way to Guadalcanal and Okinawa, thousands of young servicemen returned to Paducah, Peoria, and Pocatello, packed up their wives and goods, and headed back to the Golden Gate town to stay. They also packed up and brought their Midwest or Down East small town standards too, the jerks. As soon as they had established enough residents to enable them to vote, they voted like the provincials they were, for purity, and started the destruction of the spirit of the colorful city that fascinated them. And now we get to the crux of it. Sally wrote, "There are the people who claim that some of us debase ourselves by calling the town Frisco. The real San Franciscans, from Charles Cora to Foghorn Murphy," remember them, "have never called it anything but Frisco." I'm sure I'll keep hearing about it, my decision to call it The Secret History of Frisco. I will try to get our outraged protectors of propriety to listen to this episode, or the first one, but probably to no avail. I could not ever put it better than Sally did, so I'll say her words one last time, and then I'll put the subject to rest here on Frisco. The real San Franciscans, from Charles Cora to Foghorn Murphy, have never called it anything but Frisco. The Secret History of Frisco is a listener-supported podcast. Main episodes will always be free. Our website is www.thesecrethistoryoffrisco.com. Please join us on Patreon at www.patreon.com/Frisco. Visit the website for show notes, references, and bibliographies. And videos also. Please take advantage of our free membership option on Patreon. Paid tier members starting at as little as $1 a month will receive ad-free and bonus episodes and other perks of membership. If you enjoy the podcast, please tell your friends about it, especially those who enjoy San Francisco or true crime history. Word of mouth is the absolute best means of promotion for any creative endeavor in this world of algorithms and the ceaseless barrage of ads, notifications, and appeals on every digital platform. If you are aware of some particular aspect of San Francisco history in the 30s and 40s you would like me to research, or have a story to tell, please let me know. If you are an expert in some aspect of that same era and would like to share that expertise on the podcast, also please let me know. Once again, I'm your host, Knox Bronson. Thank you for listening. Until next time, please get a little crazy and call it Frisco.